If you're interested in the deep lore of Dark Souls, we've got a quick primer to help you get started. It's worth noting that time is pretty ambiguous in this universe, especially toward the end, but that's no matter. We'll hit the major points across all 3 Dark Souls games. A lot happens before you even touch the controller in Dark Souls. Ages before your character escapes the undead asylum, there was nothing but fog. No one lived, no one died, only dragons existed, eternally watching over everything. This era was the Age of the Ancients. Underground, a magical fire called the First Flame sparked, attracting many humanoid creatures. This legendary flame created the light and dark and life and death. Essentially, it put time in motion. 3 creatures went into the flame and claimed a Lord Soul. Gwen took the Lord Soul of Light, the Witch of Izalith took the Soul of Life, Nito claimed the Soul of Death. The souls turned them into living gods. Meanwhile, the furtive pygmy found the Dark Soul, which provided hollows with a precious thing called humanity. Thus, humans were born unto this world, but their power paled in comparison to the 3 lords. With this newfound power, the 3 lords waged war against the dragons above ground so they could claim the surface. But these dragons couldn't be killed by normal means, so one dragon, Seath the Scaleless, betrayed his kind because he was born without scales and shunned by other dragons. He revealed to the lords that dragons are immortal as long as they have their stone scales. However, the destructive power of lightning could strip them of their defenses. So Gwyn harnessed some lightning bolts, opening the path for the other 2 lords to secure victory. Nito released the Plague of Death upon the vulnerable dragons. Meanwhile, the Witch of Izalith burned their homes so they would have nowhere to run. This series of events wiped out almost all of the dragons in the world, leaving only weaker imitators, like drakes and wyverns. The only true dragon remaining was Seath. Thus, the lords moved to the surface, claiming it for themselves. With the lords in control of the world, the Age of Fire began. Gwyn built Anor Londo, his capital, atop a mountain so it could be closer to the sun. Nito took over the underground catacombs, spreading the concept of death from below, while the Witch of Izalith and her children studied fire, inventing pyromancy. Additionally, Seath sat comfortably in this new kingdom. For his services to the lords, Gwyn bestowed upon him the status of royalty. Seath was also provided a lab for him to conduct experiments on creatures, all in an effort to understand immortality. These often inhumane experiments angered some people in Anor Londo. Havel the Rock, a loyal knight under Gwyn's reign, gathered a group to take Seath down, but Gwyn disapproved. The ruler eventually locked his friend away, dooming him to turn hollow and go mad. Eventually, Seath's experiments caused the dragon himself to lose his faculties too. A village called Ulterior sits atop the Abyss, a collection of the darkness found within all mankind. It could snuff out the first flame if left unchecked. Meanwhile, Koth, one of the primordial serpents, exhibits his desire to see the Age of Fire end. He convinces the people of Ulterior to go into the Abyss and dig up the grave of Manus, the primordial man. The creature goes wild when he's awakened, causing his humanity to spiral out of control. This event speeds the growth of the Abyss. In order to stop the Abyss, Gwyn sends his trusted knight Artorias to Ulterior. With his wolf pup Sif, Artorias confronts Manus, but loses. Manus then looks for his treasured pendant across time and space, finding it in the future. He pulls the pendant to him along with the Chosen Undead, the player character. The Chosen Undead puts an end to Manus, saving the world from the Abyss. Gwyn enjoyed prosperity for some time, but eventually the first flame began to fade. The lords panicked over this startling development. The Witch of Izalith tried to recreate the flame based on all her studies. Ultimately, she fails, and this corrupted fire consumes her soul, turning her into the bed of chaos and creating the Flame of Chaos, which spawns the demons that plague the land. In a last-ditch effort, Gwyn sacrifices himself to the flame, using his soul to rekindle the fire. This works, extending the life of the flame as long as he sits within it. He becomes the first Lord of Cinder, a creature who has enough power to sacrifice itself to rekindle the flame. It's only a temporary solution, however. And by rekindling the flame, he has cursed humanity with immortality. Undead humans always come back, but the more they die, the more they become hollow. Finally, the Chosen Undead awakens, meant to fulfill the prophecy of rekindling the flame.
Regrettably, I have failed in my mission, but perhaps you can keep the torch lit.
They strive to gather enough power to sacrifice themselves and become a Lord of Cinder, at least according to prophecy. To do so, the Chosen must reach the kiln of the first flame. To open that pathway, the Chosen Undead just collect the Lord Vessel and the fragments of Gwyn's soul. They sacrifice these fragments to the Lord Vessel, which provides access to the kiln. Within this kiln, they find the cindered husk of Gwyn. It attacks, acting as the final boss in Dark Souls. After defeating it, the Chosen is given a choice. You can rekindle the flame as the prophecy intended, or you can let it die. If you choose the latter, the Chosen Undead become a Dark Lord, and a whole host of primordial serpents, including Koth, worship them for ushering in the Age of Dark. An undisclosed amount of time since the Chosen Undead made their choice, many kingdoms have risen and fallen, and the flame has been rekindled an unknown number of times. Dark Souls 2 puts its focus on the kingdom of Drangleic, founded by King Vendrick. From across the sea, a traveler named Nashandra joined Drangleic, warning Vendrick of an incoming invasion. She claimed the giants were coming to attack their kingdom. Hoping to gain the upper hand, Vendrick leads his army to the giants first, attacking them and stealing a powerful artifact from them. This artifact helps him build magical golems, which in turn contributed to the construction of Drangleic. Drangleic prospers for some time under Vendrick's rule. He marries Nashandra, who becomes the queen of the realm. Unfortunately, the curse of the undead has returned to the world. Many people have become afflicted with this curse, which eventually leads to them becoming hollow. At first, he quarantines these people, treating them as nothing more than infected. Vendrick and his brother, Aldia, deduce that this undead curse historically appeared when the flame was rekindled. They suspect that somehow the two are related. Aldia, who studied life and death itself, tried to find a way to live outside the cycle. He resorted to recreating dragons, the ancient creatures unaffected by time before the Age of Fire. He goes as far as to create a hybrid being, but nonetheless, Aldia finds no surefire way of escaping fate. No matter how hard he tries to stop the undead curse, he fails, ultimately turning into a horrifying monster. While Vendrick was trying to provide for his kingdom, he had no idea of the sinister plot his wife was hatching. Nashandra was born from a shard of Manus, the primordial man who embodied the Abyss. She represents everything dark about humanity, and the only thing she wants is to usher in an age of dark. She believed that by siding with Vendrick, he would lead her to the Throne of Want, which represented the first flame. We learn that the giants were never planning to attack Drangleic. Instead, it was Nashandra who manipulated Vendrick into fighting them. She knew that they had the golem-building artifact, which would help Drangleic prosper. The giants came back with a vengeance, decimating the kingdom. Vendrick learns of his wife's betrayal, but by the time he realizes, it's too late. He seals himself away so he can't be used by Nashandra to reach the Throne of Want. However, that doesn't matter to her. She's found a new entity that can open the way to the throne, the bearer of the curse.
Brave undead. You have proven yourself to me.
Your character in Dark Souls 2 is another undead, but this time they're closer to becoming hollow. Everyone, including your character, flocks to Drangleic in search of a cure. Instead of finding it, though, the bearer of the curse finds themselves in this political power struggle for the first flame. Nashandra tells the character sweet little lies, nudging them toward opening the Throne of Want. She herself can't do it because of the barriers Vendrick set up. After the path opens, Nashandra betrays the bearer of the curse. They fight before the throne, but the bearer ends up victorious. Originally, Dark Souls 2 funneled players into one ending, which made the protagonist sit on the Throne of Want. The meaning was left ambiguous, but many assumed this meant rekindling the flame. With the Scholars of the First Sin update, an ending was added that let players walk away from the throne instead. Time jumps ahead again in Dark Souls 3 to another cycle of rekindling, possibly the last.
The fire fades, and the lords go without thrones.
The Lord of Cinder, who would have rekindled it, Lothric, has refused to do so. So previous lords are brought back to life so their power could be used to rekindle the flame. Lothric remains past the Grand Archives with his brother, Lorien Ludleth. One of the lords sits on his throne at the Firelink Shrine, accepting his fate as nothing more than a sacrifice. The other lords, Aldrich, Devourer of Gods, the Abyss Watchers, and Yorm the Giant, continue to wander the world, carrying their lord souls with them. All 5 lords come from different places in the Dark Souls timeline. We never saw these characters in the height of their power, but based on their relationships with other bosses, we know they held power in this world in their time. With the flame fading, bells ring out, awakening the unkindled. These creatures differ from the undead, who generally seek humanity in darkness. Instead, the unkindled seek the flame itself, gathering embers as they can. The Ashen One rises as yet another prophecy-fulfilling creature that stands above the rest. It's up to them to harvest enough souls to become powerful enough to gather all 5 Lords of Cinder and bring them to the Firelink Shrine. Ludlith is already there, so the player must gather up the remaining 4. Each lord has a deep background story that provides more insight into the history of Lothric, again speaking to the cycles of rising and falling empires that Dark Souls has become known for. Along their journey, the Ashen One meets Slave Knight Gale. He's an exhausted man who has lived since Gwyn's timeline, and he carries a piece of a magic painting. When touched, the painting brings the Ashen One to the world of Ariandel. Gale pleads that the Ashen One bring fire to this world because as it is now, it's rotting. Many forlorn creatures call Ariandel home, making it a sad final destination for those with nothing else to live for. This world, much like the outside world of Dark Souls, falls victim to cycles. These painted lands eventually succumb to rot, which can only be cleansed by fire. By that point, the designated painter will have painted a new world for these inhabitants to jump to. In this cycle, a young nameless girl is the painter. Within Ariandel, our hero meets Frida, another unkindled who now calls this place home. Despite her inherent drive to find the flame, she and her father refuse to bring fire to this world. This sparks a clash with the Ashen One, who fights her to the death. Their altercation sparks a flame which starts to burn Ariandel. While the Ashen One sets Ariandel ablaze, Gale roams the outside world, gathering as much of the Dark Soul as he can. He ingests bits and pieces of it, incorporating it into his blood. He harvests the Dark Soul by killing pygmies, descendants of the original furtive pygmy who found the Dark Soul. His goal is to turn the Dark Soul into a pigment, which the painter can use to paint a new world as Ariandel burns to nothingness. Theoretically, this new world would never die. This noble quest brings Gale to the end of the world and time itself, and his changing blood drives him mad. Now he only wants blood and the Dark Soul, forgetting his initial reasoning. The Ashen One travels to the Ringed City, the last city of humanity. While there, they magically travel to the end of time, where they find Gale. The Slave Knight attacks them, hungry for blood, but they strike him down, obtaining the blood of the Dark Soul. The Ashen One gives this to the painter, who then paints a new eternal world called Ash. Having gathered all 5 Lords of Cinder, the Ashen One sacrifices them to gain access to the kiln of the first flame. It's guarded by the Soul of Cinder, a manifestation of every Lord of Cinder who rekindled it before. That includes the Chosen Undead and the bearer of the curse from the previous 2 games. After defeating it, the Ashen One has 4 options. They can sacrifice themselves to the flame to rekindle it, although it won't burn as brightly as it did in Dark Souls. They can also end the Age of Fire by letting the Firekeeper take a small bit of the flame, letting it otherwise die out. Then the Ashen One can also strike down the Firekeeper and take the flame for themselves. The 4th ending option sees the Ashen One ingest the flame into themselves while becoming the new Dark Lord. In this ending, the Age of Fire is usurped, implying that the Ashen One has started a new kind of age in the world. But as we've learned, the endings are meaningless. Empires always rise and fall in Dark Souls, but the painted world of Ash remains eternal.
One day, tiny flames will dance across the darkness, like embers linked by lords past.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more SVG videos about your favorite games are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.